Behind every extraordinary hotel is a vision, a story, and a soul. Jill Cole has spent her career reimagining hospitality as more than a place to stay. It's an experience that lingers long after the journey ends. As the leader of one of the industry's most influential all-women design firms, Jill blends artistry, travel, and passion into environments that reflect both culture and connection. Today, we step into her world, exploring the heart of a woman who has turned spaces into destinations and design into legacy. This is Beyond the Design with Jill Cole. Welcome to the show, Jill.
Thank you. Thanks, Gray. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And you've led CMCA to become one of the most respected firms in hospitality design. What originally drew you into the world of hotels and resorts?
Well, I actually started out, I wanted to be an architect. And at the time that I was going to college, one of the requirements in order to get an architectural license or even to study architecture was a pretty intensive amount of math. I am the world's worst at math. It was
I second that. Me too.
my most hated subject. And when I realized how much math was involved, I kind of went, ick. I think I'm going to change my major. I was at UCLA at the time. So I decided to get involved with art and art history. And just serendipitously, I needed a job to help pay my way through college. And someone I knew was working at a firm that did interior design. It was one of the first firms that ever did hotels, and mainly they did restaurants. And I got a job there working part-time, running the blueprint machine, and fell in love with it and quit school. Don't do that. But I quit school and ended up in the interior design field. And it was purely dumb luck.
It was in the stars, as they say.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, CMCA is an all-woman design firm, something rare and powerful in the industry. How do you cultivate creativity, collaboration, and innovation within your team?
Well, to begin with, I would tell you, because of the amount of years that we've been in business and just circumstances, we have become an all-woman design firm. It wasn't always that way. It's just over the years, things happened and here we are. And it's interesting because now there's a certain, and I don't mean to make this sound sexist in any way because it's really not intended to be, but there's a certain amount of camaraderie having only women in the firm that seems to engender a lot of teamwork and support for each other. There's, we have women of various ages. Obviously, I'm older and we have a lot of younger women as well. And they each, through the stages of their own lives, being mothers, being wives, being whatever, they have a lot of support for one another and a lot of emotional support. And it somehow or other, to me, seems to filter into the work we do.
Do you think it's because of the life experiences being an all-female firm and the collaboration and collective environment that helps substantiate that?
Yes, I think to some extent. It's interesting to me because going back to when I wanted to be an architect, the other thing that was kind of held me back was at the time, my generation, there were almost no female architects. It was very unique. Now, of course, that's changed dramatically. And I think that even though now it's very accepted for women to be in positions of responsibility in the architecture and design community, it wasn't always so. And I like the contrast that the younger generation doesn't feel that intimidation at all. I think it's wonderful. whatever has happened to our society, good or bad, however you look at it, I think the one thing that has happened is women don't sit and think about, oh, I can't do this for a living because I'm a woman. When
Sure.
I was at that stage of deciding what I wanted to do for a living, it was part of the thought process.
Right. Well, since your journey started and the hospitality sector has kind of grown and taken a mind upon its own, now everything's a very much a experiential environment and not just a place to go to, you stay, you eat, and then you leave. It's been very transformative. What do you think are the most important qualities of a successful hospitality designer today? And how do you foster those qualities within your own firm?
Well, I think first of all, the reason I think I was drawn to the hospitality design industry specifically, because I started out doing office interiors, actually. Mm-hmm. What's interesting to me about hospitality is the physical property is a little bit of everything. It's offices, it's guest rooms, it's restaurants, it's bars, it's lobbies, it's meeting spaces. So you have an opportunity to kind of think through how all those spaces work, which to me is fascinating. But in addition, besides the fact that the design is terribly, terribly important, it's a business. And for that reason, you also have to be cognizant of the business aspect of what you're doing. It has to make a profit or you're not going to be a successful hospitality designer. So you may have grandissimo ideas about what something should look like and how it should be, but it also has to be profitable for your client. Mm-hmm. So that's a very important element that doesn't really occur if you're doing residential or you're doing medical or you're doing offices. It's kind of a different mindset. And I find that fascinating. I love having to put all these different requirements into a hopper and come out with something that makes everybody happy.
True. And plus the environment, as you mentioned, residential is about a personality, a lifestyle, where hospitality is about the creation of an environment and a brand and the experience that your guests are having. So you don't really know the guest, you know the brand, but you're creating something that's going to be related to that client experience, I guess, in essence.
Exactly. And it's interesting because, and I'm sure you've had similar experiences having been in the industry as well. Right. What's fascinating to me is sometimes you'll have a client who doesn't own a lot of hotels. I mean, we have sort of a mixed bag. We have small bed and breakfast type projects and we have large, resorts with massive amounts of meeting space and so forth and so on. And so the clientele also varies dramatically. And what's interesting to me is walking your way through the client is their own personal prejudices and tastes and trying to help them find a way to appeal to a broad market. Sometimes it's hard for them to let that go.
Right.
Gee whiz, I hate blue. I mean, I remember actually having those kinds of conversations with people and saying, just because you hate blue doesn't mean that your guests aren't going to hate blue. Let's get real here. Let's think about how to make you money and make the people who are coming to your hotel feel good and want to come back and enjoy themselves. And even if they're there for work, you want them to feel good about being where the place you've created. It's very important.
Well, sometimes it's their home away from home, especially for business travelers,
Exactly. Exactly.
What's the most memorable hotel you've ever stayed in and why?
The most memorable hotel I ever stayed in and why? Well, I fall in love pretty easily. So I hate to say that I sound kind of like a loose person, but some of the more memorable places that I've stayed in, I stayed at a wonderful tented luxury resort in India. It was an Oberoi. Mm. It was one of the first in the world, even before they were doing them to much extent in Africa. And it was really wonderful to me because it was a tent but it was a suite. They had a hard bathroom, so to speak. It had a bathtub, it had a shower, it had all these things. I was just recently in Africa and, kind of had the same thing. But I was in India for the first time a really long time ago. And it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. And it really made a huge impression on me. I just last year, again, I was at am I allowed to mention names?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I was at Claridge's, and I've stayed in Claridge's for many, many years, but I hadn't been there in quite a long time. And I was very impressed with how they'd reimagined it. It was interesting because I stayed in it in its old kind of frumpy days in the 70s and the 80s. And now it's very much something of the present. And it's really an interesting hotel, particularly since the majority of the rooms face like a light well. They don't even have windows outside. And I think they handled all of that really brilliantly.
Right. One of my favorites is Dorchester. That's one of my, just the ambiance.
Absolutely, right down the road.
Yeah. If you could design a hotel in any city in the world, where would it be, and what would its name and theme be?
Because I would tell you one of my passions is ancient history. I love ancient history, archaeology, all of that. Oh, wow. I think I would love to design a hotel in Cairo. And I would love to
Cairo?
In Cairo. And I would love to, matter of fact, I just got a text message this morning from a friend of mine who's on the Nile at the moment. And she sent me all of these pictures and I went, oh, so jealous. I wish I was there with you right now. But I'm very excited about this is something right now. I'm very excited about the new Cairo Museum. I haven't seen it yet, but I just love reading and understanding and absorbing all of that. I climbed through the tombs. I was on my hands and knees. I love it all. I would love to create something that gives you that, or it gave me a thrill. And I would love to share that thrill with people who are going to Cairo. I haven't been there in a while, I admit it, but I was pretty disappointed in the hotels that I saw there.
I haven't been there for a number of years either. Like you, I'd love to see the new museum. I heard it's supposed to be spectacular.
Yes.
The caliber of it.
Right.
Well, you're known for creating destinations that capture a true sense of a place. What's your process for ensuring that authenticity comes through into your designs? And what is that process for you and your team?
Well, I think it's very important when you begin, and this is not anything unique, I don't think, is, study the area, learn as much about it as you possibly can, find out what people come there for. Why? Aside from business, obviously, which is a different kind of thought process. But if you're doing a destination, particularly a destination resort, it's critical that a person chooses to go to a destination pretty much typically first. They don't choose to go to a hotel. First, they choose to go to the place that it's in. Yeah. So you need to express that as much as possible. And you've got to learn about that place if you don't know it already. And that's true, I think, even to the same extent or maybe slightly less, even for a business hotel. If somebody's doing business in a city, you still want them to know they're there.
True.
I'm sure we all remember the olden days before all of this site-specific became very, very important. You'd wake up in the morning in a hotel, and you didn't know what city you were in.
True.
I'm serious. There was a time when I began in the business where it was really important that you woke up in the morning and knew you were in a Marriott or a Hilton or a Hyatt. Didn't matter where it was. You just needed to know that was the brand of hotel you were in.
Correct. Because
that's changed.
Yeah, they were all very cookie cuttered. They had a brand identity.
And that's changed dramatically. And I think it's wonderful because it's important. People in the hotel industry started to realize, hey, wait a minute. Our customers, our guests are going to a place specifically. We need to show them that they're there.
It's that connectivity to place and environment. And I think it sets it apart, especially for those brands that, like you mentioned early on, years and years ago, that it was branded, it was cookie cutter stamped, it was a Hilton in this city, but it looked like the Hilton in the next city, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. I'm old enough to remember those days.
Me too. Well, you have a fascination and curation of art. How does the love of art influence your approach to hospitality interiors?
Well, I've been collecting for a long, long time. And I find that I'm very picky. I mean, it's become kind of, to some extent, a little bit of a cliche that a lot of hotels are sort of hanging their hats on art. Mm-hmm. And there's an awful lot of art out there that, forgive me, I think is commercial. Mm-hmm. Balancing a budget and quality of art, and referencing local artists whenever and as much as possible, arts and crafts, all of that I think needs to go into the mix. I wouldn't expect a hotel to spend the kind of money that, a museum would spend on, adding art. That doesn't make any financial sense, particularly. Although there are a couple of hotel companies that are in fact trying to do that to a great mm-hmm. extent. And I kind of wonder, I'm sure there are people that go because of the art collection, but I wonder how many people that is, in fact.
True. Oh, plus it's also very transient. So the art's not really being appreciated, especially like in the Middle East and Qatar. They have amazing art in that airport, but no one's seen it unless you're passing through.
Right.
So the intensity and the emotion that is, I think, extracted from us being humans from art is lost. And it's just, it's like put away. You might as well put it in the closet.
Right. So, I mean, it's kind of, in a sense, yes, it's art, but in a sense, it's also almost graphics. Mm-hmm. It's something to lend. I mean, I hate to say this word because it sounds demeaning, and I don't mean it to, but it lends decoration, it lends excitement. And you don't want junk. Right. But on the other hand, can you afford a David Hockney on the wall? I don't think so.
I wish I could. So does certain art influence you or motivate you, inspire you as you're going through the process of a project? Let's say if you're given a certain projects, like, I saw this piece and this just inspires me because it's part of the program, or kind of that connectivity that's outlined for the project.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I was looking yesterday there. I don't know if you've heard about it yet. There's a huge David Hockney retrospective that just opened in Paris at the Vuitton, I think mm-hmm. yesterday or the day before. And I'm actually going next month to see it. His work fascinates me. It's art and it's graphics, and there was a huge show of his in San Francisco about 10 years ago. There was a lot of video work and things like that, things that he did on iPads. I'm intrigued with all of that. And I think a lot of that kind of spirit can be incorporated into a space mm-hmm. in a design kind of way. I'm very inspired by that sort of thing.
How do you ensure that the hotels you design remain timeless, even in an industry shaped by constantly evolving trends and products, and the industry itself is always changing? It used to be, as we mentioned, very cookie cutter and stamped, and each hotel looked like itself from the next city, and then became very experiential environments and driven by art or place. How do you constantly evolve and keep up to date in those trends?
I would tell you that's challenging because, you know, one of the things that happens is, and I think we're all guilty of this, we kind of fall in love with trends and, you know, color palettes, all kinds of things. You know, the old joke about, you know, avocado green shag carpet is true. I think you don't want to look like you're outdated, but on the other hand, you also don't want to create a space that's so trendy that the owner is going to have to remodel it 3 years later because it's so edgy. Yes, there are clients who are willing to take that kind of risk, but it's a huge risk. And so I think you have to be educated enough to put your money, balance the budget in a way that the things that are very trendy are ephemeral and don't cost a lot of money so they can be changed relatively soon. Whereas, I mean, you know what the word case goods means, hard goods. Those have to, because they're such a large part of the budget, or say a bathroom, which costs a lot of money, those have to be more timeless. You've got to come up with something that looks good, is attractive, is functional, but isn't going to date that quickly because it's too expensive to change that on a regular basis. The soft goods, on the other hand, can be more ephemeral.
Very, very true. Well, Jill, creating emotional connections with guests is something that CMCA is well known. I'll get it right. I will. Sorry. Excuse my error. Can you share an example of a project where this was successfully achieved?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what the.
Oh, well, creating emotional connections with guests is something that CMCA does quite phenomenally. Can you share an example of a project where this was successfully achieved?
Well, a project that we did actually quite a long time ago when we were doing two projects at the same time. One was the Hotel Valley Ho in Scottsdale, Arizona, which had been an old Ramada Inn, and it was a new buyer, and they wanted to create something that was very, you know, cool. And we did a very mid-century project there. If you look at the old photographs, I think there's probably still some even on our website. It's very of the moment it was created, and it's very stylized and very 50s. At the same time, we were doing another project, the Lodge at Sea Island, which was related to the Cloister Hotel, which was a classic old hotel built in the 20s. Right. And it was supposed to look like like an old mansion in the East Coast. And it's very, very traditional and very woodsy. And I think those two properties, when you look at them side by side, really are an expression of the place and time that they were done and what they were intended to be. And I love comparing the contrast between the two because it's so stark.
Love it. I think I've been to the one in Scottsdale. It sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it's a very cool hotel. I mean, it's been slightly redone since then, but it's still one of the favorite projects that we did that I really think worked fabulously well. And it wasn't a high budget job at all.
What's your go-to travel destination for design inspiration and motivation?
I spend a lot of time in museums all over the world. I'm a complete and total museum junkie. And I do get a lot of inspiration from that. I can't say it's specific to anything in particular. Also, I love to look at, as we all do, I love to look at new hotels, of course, and new restaurants. I'm also a foodie. So, you know, I have to say I lead a pretty good life.
When you do travel and stay in other hotels and other properties done by other designers, can you turn it off and not be the designer where you tweak?
No. I'm like you, I'm sure. I'm super critical. It's right. Terrible. You know,
why did you do that? Why did you do that?
To the point of being actually snarky. I cannot tell a lie. It's like, what the heck were they thinking of when they did this?
This is all wrong. Given your vast collection of artwork, is there a favorite piece of your art in your personal collection that just you're always drawn to, that you can just stare at for hours?
I actually, It depends on the day of the week. But one of my favorite pieces is I for a period of time, I was very focused on Claes Oldenburg. And I have a large piece of his. It's a sculpture called, excuse me for saying this, I hope I don't get bleeped, it's a soft screw. And it's a gigantic rubber screw that sort of sags over. And then there's a drawing that I have of it next to it. And it's so him. It's so quirky. I love looking at it. I have a bunch of his. I have a baked potato he did. I have a bunch of different pieces of his. I just love looking at it all. It makes me smile.
Hey, that's what it's all about, making you happy and getting that emotion make you smile. And we're not censored, so you can say whatever you want to say.
Because it is a kind of scandalous name.
If you had to describe your design philosophy in one word, what would it be?
One word?
Mm-hmm. I'll give you two.
Joyous.
Okay. And why is that?
Because I'm joyous creating things. I want that to be felt by the people who use the spaces.
I like it. Well, Jill, running an all-woman firm is an achievement in itself. What are some of the unique strengths you see in your team that help set CMCA apart?
Well, because, we've evolved, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, over the years to become a female firm. Mm-hmm. I think I always had a respect and an understanding of some of the responsibilities that the women who worked for my firm had in addition to their professional lives, and trying to accommodate that to the greatest extent possible. I would say, first and foremost, obviously, being a mother. We are always interested in having people of all ages work for us. I think that's important too, to have kind of all those perspectives. But obviously the younger women are also in the middle of having children, having relationships, whatever, and figuring out a way. This was way before people worked remote, figuring out ways to allow these women to have lives outside of their work. First of all, selfishly, it gave us an edge in finding good people. It also gave them the comfort that they, if there was an issue at home or with their child or their children, that we were sympathetic to that and understanding and accepted it and didn't go, hey, you were out 3 days last week because your kid had the sniffles. What the heck's going on here? Right. So I think that's always been something that has been important. And that probably is one of the reasons that it's ended up being an all-female firm.
Makes sense. What are you most surprised about that you've learned about yourself during this journey in this field, in this creative environment?
I've learned about myself that's surprising.
Especially since you started out wanting to be an architect and you kind of took a turn there. So,
well, I kind of feel like I ended up where I should be. I feel what I do for a living makes me feel good. It makes me feel as if I've done something, accomplished something. Not that I'm trying to say, oh, look at this. I'm like, right. It's just, it satisfies my soul, and I'm allowed, because of my profession, to kind of explore and enjoy the other things that I enjoy. Like I said, traveling, museums, visual things. I'm a very visual person, very visual. And I also mentioned, I love food. Mm-hmm. And, that's a very important part of also what I do. I love to entertain. I do a lot of that. Pretty much every week we have at least one dinner party.
Oh, nice. I'll come next week.
Okay, come on over.
What do you feel is the most important aspect of leadership and mentoring a team in a creative company like CMCA?
Trying to the greatest extent possible, listen to the individuals that you're working with and understand their individual needs and background. One of the things I've always done since the very beginning, starting the firm, whenever I interviewed anybody for a job, I always would look them in the eye and say, the most important thing to me is I want you to feel happy and enthusiastic coming to the office and going to work. If we can't create an environment like that for you, then we need to pass on each other, and you find another place and we'll find somebody else too.
That I think is a huge, important factor. And you have to have a passion for what you do and enjoy what you do. I mean,
absolutely.
It's being creatives. It shows in your projects, in your finished product, that if you have a passion or if you don't have a passion,
right.
I think that's very important, especially in this industry, that you have to really love it and go through the hoops and the trials and tribulations and ups and downs and everything else.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like I said, joyous is the word that I would describe. And it should filter through everything. Mm-hmm. The office, the environment, and your creative juices, all of it.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the sector that you're in, the hospitality sector, and, doing presentations to the developers and the owner and the brands, they're going to see it when you're presenting.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, how do you balance creativity with the business side of things, especially when working on such large-scale hospitality projects?
I think I told you also earlier in the conversation, I was always terrible at math. One of the things, I found that technology has permitted me to become more able to comprehend budgeting, balancing numbers, doing all of that kind of stuff that I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to do anything like that. But I've come to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. And it is important, as I said before, it's not just about being creative. It's about balancing the numbers with the creative part of what you're doing. So I think over the years, it's kind of snuck into my fiber, I understand it now. And it's, running a company, I've got the same issues. I have to balance a budget. We get so much income and so much outgo, and we have to make all of that work. Absolutely. So it's the same thing.
Yeah. What's the most surprising lesson you've learned through travel that's influenced your design work?
The most surprising thing I've learned through travel. Sometimes you end up in places you didn't plan to be. I would say that happens. I just had that happen to me recently. I was in Los Angeles for a large conference I was speaking at, and I was flying back up to the Napa Valley, and my flight took off, flew up to the Napa Valley, made a U-turn, and flew back, actually to Santa Rosa, and flew back to LAX. And I ended up in LAX at midnight. Got on the first airport bus I could find and ended up sleeping in a hotel that I'd driven by for years because my main office is in LA. I never thought I'd ever end up staying in an airport hotel at LAX. It was a real eye-opener. That was an interesting educational process. Talk about going into a hotel and somebody else has designed. I did learn from that.
It didn't turn off even at midnight.
No, even though I was dog tired and really angry because I had just been flown up to Santa Rosa and back from Santa Rosa. And then I also recently stayed, interestingly enough, at, which I'm sure you've seen or heard of at least, the TWA Hotel in JFK.
Yes.
I think airport hotels are an interesting design challenge. I myself have never designed one, but I'd really like to. I really would.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of a thing.
It is. It is completely. Well, Jill, you've mentioned that you're a foodie. If you have to design a hotel inspired by your favorite dish, what's on the menu and how does it translate to the interiors?
I'm very site specific about food too. I'm a firm believer in being a locavore. So, that translates into my food experience as well. Obviously living in the Napa Valley, I'm blessed with a vast amount of local produce. Mm-hmm. And, that inspires a lot of what I do in the kitchen. And I'm very much a seasonal person, which obviously seasonality does not enter into hospitality design.
Right.
But I do believe that food should be seasonal. I mean, you don't want to sit down and, have a giant roast beef in July. I don't think.
True. Nah. No, I'm a firm believer. I believe what you do. It's seasonal and farm to table. I mean, Napa has such a huge environment surrounding it, and
right.
Culturally, the wine industry and just the farms in that valley.
But I think that's true also. I mean, farm to table has become almost a cliche worldwide. People, it's kind of the same thing. It's like the design of your hotel should express the area. The food you eat expresses your area. It's all kind of, people are starting to realize how interesting that is. If you're in China, you don't want to go to a McDonald's, or at least I don't. Yeah. You want to have local food. You want to see what it's like. You want to try it.
And it's an interesting trend that's caught on in the U.S., where in Europe, farm to table has been a staple for years and years and years, for quite a long time. What's one design trend you hope never goes away?
One design trend I hope never goes away. That's a very good question. I don't think it's anything stylistic. I think I don't know. I think I like the local expression. I hope that does not go away. I hope we don't go back to the days where I'm sleeping in an X brand hotel, because I've been through that.
Right.
And I like it better this way.
Tell us a little bit about some of the current projects you and your team are working on.
Well, I think I mentioned to you before we actually started recording. It's interesting. We're doing a very small bed and breakfast here in Napa right now. It's a historic landmark building. Mm-hmm. It's scheduled to open in the next week or 10 days. And on the other end of the spectrum, we're finishing a massive renovation of a very large resort/conference hotel in Arizona that's gone on for, actually we've been working on it for about 3 or 4 years, because we had to do it in phases. It had to stay open during all of the renovation. So, I mean, those are two extremes on either end of the spectrum. And I find having those kind of challenges really keeps my creative juices flowing. I enjoy that. I like the contrast to the two ends of the spectrum.
Fantastic. Well, hotels are meant to stand the test of time, but the industry is always ever changing and evolving. How do you approach designing a property with longevity in mind, and given, trends come and go? And as we mentioned, you can outdo yourself, where you're going to have to change it in 3 years if you don't properly create something that has a little bit more sustainability and longevity. So how do you approach designing a property with longevity in mind?
Well, I think, that goes back to what we started to talk about a little earlier. To a large extent, once you get past the planning portion of it, if you've got a good basic plan, footprint, so to speak, and we do get involved with the basic planning if something's being built from scratch, or if it's being remodeled or repurposed. You want to create spaces that are functional and work well, because it's not very often that you go back and start ripping walls down between guest rooms or anything like that. So you've got your basic footprint that needs to really stand the test of time. Mm-hmm. And then layered on top of that, then you start looking at realistically in a hotel, things have a lifespan. And, you know, I'm sure you've looked at plenty of hotel PIPs in your life, property improvement plans. The rule of thumb is it's about 7 years for soft goods, and it's 15 average for hard goods. And then I would say, you know, the bathrooms, which are a very expensive part of a guest room. I'm just using guest rooms as a typical thing here. You're looking at probably wanting to keep those things for at least 17, 18, 20 years. You might change the wall covering. You might change the faucets or the mirrors or the artwork, but usually you don't start really ripping a bathroom apart. Although these days, as you probably are also aware, you know, almost every single hotel we get involved with, we're ripping out bathtubs and putting in walk-in showers.
Right.
That's just kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
So there's that big change, and that gets complicated because it has to do with drain lines and all kinds of other stuff. So
various cost factors associated to that. Especially, you know, working in the gaming industry and in Vegas, you know, and the properties that go through so much abuse.
Right.
Sometimes those timelines are actually brought down to a lesser.
Yeah, I mean, sure, because obviously the lifespan of the interior is very much related to the occupancy levels as well. Mm-hmm. You know, the hotels in Vegas have high turnover and high occupancies if they're successful. Some of the other hotels, the resort hotels, non-casino type resort hotels, don't run those kinds of occupancies. So it's a different kind of traffic pattern.
True. And the guest experience, you know, you don't have people jumping on beds and party animals like you do in resorts versus Las Vegas. What's one project that stands out to you as a defining moment in your career?
The first one I ever did.
Yeah.
The Adolphus in Dallas, which I did. It was an accident. I had a client who was buying old office buildings, and I was helping him renovate them to be from like a C grade office building to an A grade office building. And he bought the block that the Adolphus is in, downtown Dallas. And he was planning to turn the Adolphus, which had been built in 1913 and had become effectively an SRO. It was really in bad shape. His plan was to turn it into an office building. And then the city of Dallas would not give him a permit to do it. So we were talking, and he said to me, "Have you ever designed a hotel?" I said, "No, but I worked for a company that did a long time ago." He goes, "Okay, well, I've never owned a hotel either." And he was, lucky for me, he was adventurous enough and I was enthusiastic enough. And we, you know, basically gutted the hotel and rebuilt it. And I loved it. I loved the whole process. I was just couldn't have been happier doing it. And I thought, this is the career for me. I'm going to become a hotel designer. Forget about office interiors. I don't want to do them anymore. Here I am.
And here you are. When you look at the future of hospitality design, what trends or shifts are you most excited about?
Well, I think right now, actually, I just wrote an article about it. I'm very intrigued with integrating technology on all levels into hospitality. Technology in and of itself isn't a very friendly thing. You know, it's not warm and cuddly.
No.
And figuring out ways to make it warm and cuddly is one challenge. And the other is, I mean, these days, nobody that stays in a hotel, with zero exception, it doesn't expect to find lots of places to plug things in, super good technological, you know, facilities for whatever it is they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And And then we are also having the balance of saving our planet by controlling environments through technology. Things as simple as, when you leave in Europe, they've been doing it for years. You take your room key and you stick it in a slot in your room, and then you can turn your lights on and off. Mm-hmm. It's only just starting to happen in the United States. Those kinds of simple things that we should have done years ago that we are now doing. Now that electricity costs so much money, the hotel owners are going, wait a minute, we got to think about all this stuff.
Right.
So that to me is something that's happening right now. Where do you put all those plugs? How do you make them so they're not ugly? How do you, all of these kinds of interesting things that are going on.
Is there one part of the industry sector that you still want to take a stab at that you haven't yet?
Yeah, I just mentioned, I think it would be fun to try to do an airport hotel.
Yeah.
It sounds silly. I know it doesn't sound high status, but I still think it would be interesting to do one and think about, why is a person staying in an airport hotel? Because they've missed a plane, or they're to start off with, they're in a terrible mood, mostly. And how do you make them feel happy for a minute? I'd love to try that. That sounds to me like a really good challenge.
Well, you've said it now, so it's out in the world. So, as they say.
Yeah, if anybody's listening, call me. I'd love to do an airport hotel.
Well, what's next for Jill? And what's next for CMCA?
Well, we are, right now, it's interesting. Since the pandemic, really, we've been mostly doing large renovations and reimaginings. I think the economy is such that we're not seeing a lot of new hotels being built at the moment. Mm-hmm. There's one or two that I have sort of in the background that are kind of maybe going to happen. But from what I've heard, getting financing for these things is really challenging. So I'm hoping that next for us, the economy will, the lending economy will kind of loosen up a little bit, and we'll get an opportunity to do some ground up projects. Even though I love doing the renovations, they're very challenging and interesting. But a ground up would be, the last ground up hotel we did opened 3 years ago.
During your time as being a creative in this industry, what's one mark you want to put on the hospitality sector?
Yeah. That's a very hard question to answer. I think I believe that, like design, like I talked about those two projects that were so different that we did both at the same time. Mm-hmm. I'd like to be, and I know this sounds kind of goofy, but I'd like to be known as a person that created, and a firm that creates design that is meaningful for where it is and what it is, as opposed to a design that everybody can say, oh, I know so-and-so designed that. Mm-hmm. I think it takes much more creativity, personally. This sounds very egocentric, and I don't mean it to, but it takes much more creativity to reinvent things all the time. Mm-hmm. I think it's much more easy to be, it sounds really egocentric, Frank Lloyd Wright, or somebody who does really recognizable stuff.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, Jill, before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or advice for those listening who are passionate about the future of hospitality design, or for a young designer out there that's having an idea of getting into this industry?
Well, I think if you're a designer specifically, or an interior designer or an architect, I think hospitality is a very interesting and exciting specialty. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage people who don't know that much about it to look into it. as a possible opportunity for them if they want to be designers. Because as I stated earlier, you kind of get to do the lot. It's all different kinds of spaces. So it really affords an opportunity to experience a lot of different kinds of design.
Well, thank you. Well, we appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure having you on our show and meeting you.
Thank you, Gray. It was lovely talking to you. I enjoyed it very much.
Oh, good. Well, you take care, and we will chat soon, Jill. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and that of CMCA.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jill Cole shows us that design at its best is not about beauty or comfort. It's about memory, belonging, and the stories we carry with us when we leave a place. Her journey reminds us that design is not about walls or furniture. It is about shaping how we live, how we gather, and how we feel at home in the world. Thank you, Jill. This is Beyond the Design.
Hi, you're listening to a Pod for Good Media Network podcast. We are a network that provides podcasting production services and a supportive community in which podcasters can thrive. If you're a podcaster local in the Tulsa area, we would love to have your show on the network. If you are interested in starting one, we would love to help you get started. Find us online at podforgoodmedia.com and fill out our Pod With Us form. Happy podcasting.